Welcome to Write to Publish, your go-to podcast for all things writing and publishing. I'm Karen Stanley, a 14 times published author and the founder of Mabel and Stanley Publishing. Join me as I share a multitude of tips and insights drawn from my own writing and publishing journey. We'll be hearing from some inspirational authors too, who will share their writing experiences and top tips for success. Each week, we'll learn about an aspect of writing, from composition to genre and from publishing to marketing. Listen in as we learn and chat about all things writing and publishing, and let's get you on the right path.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Write to Publish with me, Karen Stanley. I hope you're all well and thank you for joining me again today. So today our episode is entitled Common Writing Mistakes and How to Fix Them. I'd like to add a little caveat to that, in that there are loads of rules in inverted commas and regulations and things that you absolutely must not do in your writing and things that are, tantamount to sacrilege. And really, writing is about you finding your way, you finding your voice, you finding what works and what doesn't work. And some of the best writers in the business break a lot of rules, but sometimes you have to know what the rules are in order to be able to break them. So just because it's a rule, if you try it in your writing and it doesn't work, then you don't have to follow it. But as long as you know the basic rules and you know the difference between terrible writing and good writing, then you do have that sort of little bit of creative license, a little bit of creative freedom. But some of these are very generic and they might apply more to one genre than another. They might apply more to one style than another, and it very much depends on you, the author, the story, the construct, all of that. So rules are there to be broken, dare I say it, but also you do need to know what they are before you start breaking them willy-nilly and getting yourself into a fix. So without further ado, let's get on today and talk about these kind of common mistakes. We're just going to cover sort of four, I say the worst offenders, but the ones that probably give people the most reason to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And these sort of things, they can really sink your story. They can bore your reader. They can make your writing and your book feel a bit amateurish, so they're things that you really do need to address if you're not sure about it. So we're going to cover four of the worst offenders. One of them, and some of them, they're a little bit techno jargony. So I apologize if it blows your mind a little bit. Some of this you need to know. Some of this can be a little bit confusing. If you do have any questions, Karen at mabelandstanleypublishing.com, do get in touch and I'll always try and help. So we're going to talk about passive voice. We're going to talk about info dumping. That's a biggie. We're going to talk about weak openings and flat characters. Those are four of the things that really could kill off a good story if you're not careful. And then we'll talk about each of those ones in turn, and I'll give you some strategies for fixing them so that you can get your writing sort of working for you instead of against you, if that makes sense. So let's talk about passive voice. And this really does divide opinion. Loads of snobbery, as there always is in the writing world, and pomposity about people who pretend to know a lot about it, people who know nothing about it, and some people in between. And its passive voice isn't the devil incarnate, but it is a problem if it makes your sentences a bit sort of clunky or vague or a bit lifeless. So, for example, here, an example of passive voice: the cake was eaten by the dog. Okay, so technically it's correct. There's nothing wrong with it, but it does sound kind of dull. The cake was eaten by the dog, and overly formal. Sounds a bit pompous, doesn't it? And who's the star of this sentence? Is it the dog? Is it the cake? Is it, the mystery eater? And in an active voice, we'll put the subject sort of front and center. So the dog ate the cake. Yeah, we're clear, we're direct, we know who did what. The dog is eating the cake. Sometimes writers will slip into passive voice if they want to sound formal or when they're avoiding sort of assigning blame, that kind of thing. But in fiction, though, it does distance the reader from the action for what I hope you can hear are obvious reasons. So read your sentences aloud, and if you hear was or were followed by a past participle, which basically means the past tense of the verb, and these often end in ed, check if you can rewrite it correctly, and think about who's actually doing the action here and put them at the start. So they're the subject of the sentence. So keep your passive for when the receiver of the action is more important than the doer. I'm sorry if that blows your mind. So have a think about it here. So the vault was emptied overnight. Now that's passive because we're saying something is happening to the vault. However, if your mystery is hinging on who did it, then that passive works really well there, doesn't it? Because you don't want to say John the burglar opened the vault, because you're giving everything away. So the vault was opened by overnight. There's an element of mystery about that. So, passive voice can be really great. A little bit can be amazing, but if you put it in everything, then it just will destroy your writing completely. So think about it. If you want an air of mystery, an element of mystery, and the subject, so in this case, the doer is more important than the receiver of the action, then you might use your passive voice. So the vault was emptied overnight. Okay. If you wanted that in active voice, it would be John emptied the vault. That loses something. However, the cake was eaten by the dog, bit pompous, bit flowery, bit flamboyant. The dog ate the cake, much better. So it's really going to be trial and error. Feel your way a little bit and you'll feel when it works. But if you've got was or were, read it aloud and you've got a past tense verb, does it make sense? Okay, I hope you've still listening and not lost the will. So this section, now this is something I see all the time, and it's really difficult to sometimes get over to the author that actually we don't need this, and this is info dumping. So, this has ruined many a first chapter in that there's far too much information given in one go. When you shove a huge chunk of backstory, word building, technical explanation right at the start, especially because you think your reader needs to understand. Spoiler alert here is they probably don't. They can usually work it out for themselves. So imagine you open a book and the first 5 pages are a detailed history of fictional kingdoms' tax laws, for example. So unless your reader is a medieval accountant, they're probably falling asleep. Yeah. Do they need to know that information? It's kind of irrelevant to the story. And the reason it happens is because you've worked really hard to build your world or research your topic and you want to show it off. But readers need to care about your story before they care about your world. So these little backstory bits, extra info, they need to be engrossed in the story before they're going to care about that stuff. So the way to fix it is you're going to drip feed your information through action, dialogue, and conflict. You only need to tell the reader, what they need to know right now in order to understand the scene. And what we use an analogy for this, it's known as the iceberg rule. So your job is to know the full 90% beneath the surface of your story, but you only show the 10%, the tip of that iceberg, that matters in that moment. So after your first draft, go through every scene and highlight the backstory or the world building bits and ask, can this be shown through character action, or can I delay it until the reader is already hooked? Yeah. Think you watch a whodunit. You don't want to know that the killer was a troubled, person who'd experienced X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G straight from the off. You want to really, be engrossed in the atrocities that this serial murderer has committed. You want to be engaged in, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. And then you're drip fed that backstory as the murder mystery, unfolds. We don't want it all in one go. It slows things down. It clunks things up, if that even is a phrase, and it will really sort of bore your reader and quite possibly turn them off. So rule number three, faux pas number 3 is weak openings. Now, this one is quite deadly because it decides whether the reader gives you a chance or not. Yeah. So if you've got a weak opening, the reader might go, oh, can't be bothered, puts your book down, goes in the did not finish pile, did not even really start it. Okay. And examples, and again, very, very subjective, depends on your story, your genre, your style. A weak opening might be starting with your character waking up and brushing their teeth. Yeah. Now, unless something wild is about to happen mid-brush, we probably don't need to know that. Yeah. We can find a much stronger way to open that story. We don't really want pages of weather description unless you're talking about an apocalyptic happening, that is wholly, the result of an ice age or, a cataclysmic weather event. We don't need to all that. We don't want endless prologues with zero tension. That's the truth of it. And the reason it happens is because the writers are sort of warming up, easing into the story, instead of starting at the moment things change. And you think about all the best films you've watched, when there's a real hook. I watched a series recently called Mr. In Between. If you have seen it, it's amazing. If you haven't seen it, I apologise. There's a bit of a spoiler alert coming up. But he is basically a hitman, okay? And the opening scene is he's chatting to this man, and this man is clearly telling him a pack of lies about why he hasn't paid his debt. Now, we know nothing about the hitman at this point. We know nothing about his character, about his backstory, about anything that's happened to him. He has this conversation with the guy who's clearly lying about, yes, I've paid my debt, and he hadn't. The hitman takes a phone call, and the next thing we know is he literally pushes the guy backwards over a balcony. Now, that was the opening 2 minutes. I tell you, I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, I need to watch this. And fortunately, the promise of what was going to happen got better and better. So the series really did live up to it. If you haven't seen it, it's called Mr. In Between. It's Australian, I believe. But that said more about that man's character without him really saying anything in 2 minutes than you might have done in 20 minutes of description about his backstory. As the series went on, you learn lots about his backstory and about why he is what he is and why he is and who he is and how he is and all of that. But that one action, we spoke volumes. So his action explained much more than he might have done if we'd taken the time to explain it in words. So that's exactly what I'm going to tell you to do now. Drop your reader into a moment of change, conflict, or tension, and think, what's the first thing that's going to make my reader curious? And don't confuse action with chaos. Your opening needs interest, not necessarily too much. So it was a very simple opening, but it spoke volumes. And finally, flat characters. The cardboard cutout problem, the flat characters, they don't feel real. They exist to serve the plot, but they don't have believable desires, flaws, contradictions, and readers sort of forget about them 5 minutes after putting the book down. And sometimes it's because the plot is the most important thing in your story and the characters are just puppets, really. And sometimes it's because the writer hasn't dug deep enough down into their psychology. They haven't thought enough about character development. They haven't created enough of a character profile. They haven't developed the characters enough. They don't know enough about their characters before they start, and that's going to cause them to be flat. So the way to fix this is you need to give them clear goals and obstacles and add contradictions. So what about, the brave firefighter who's terrified of public speaking, for example, or the ruthless CEO who secretly writes romantic poetry? Let them make mistakes. Perfect people are boring and unrealistic, unless you're Mary Poppins, of course. And you need to know more about your character than you put on the page. Write them a backstory by all means, and that backstory can be pretty detailed, but you only reveal bits as they're needed. Again, goes a bit back to sort of info dumping. We don't want all of that in one go. And remember, readers don't just follow plots, they follow people. What brings your story to life are the characters and the people in it. And these people need to be worth following. If that character isn't developed, interesting, exciting, engaging, frightening, complex, why are we going to waste our time reading about them? So, and a few rapid fire tips. Here we go. Too many adverbs that can really sort of ruin your writing. Stephen King is not a fan of adverbs at all. So ran quickly, swap it for sprinted. Another thing, overcomplicated language. If your reader needs a thesaurus, you've lost them. So don't try to be clever and bamboozle your reader. Your reader does not want to be bamboozled. Dialogue that sounds wooden, read it out loud. If it sounds like a bad soap opera or really wooden acting, rewrite it. Okay, so there you have it. 4 of the most common writing mistakes and a few quick practical ways to fix them. And these things aren't about writing perfectly. They're about writing with intention. Your job is not to avoid every mistake ever. It's to know when you're making those mistakes and then choosing whether they serve your story. If you enjoyed the episode today, please do follow, share, comment, like. All of that helps us to reach more writers with the podcast, and it means the world to me to know that you're enjoying the content. And, let me know which mistake you're guilty of making. No judgment. We've all been there. Email me, Karen, at mabelandstanleypublishing.com. I love to hear about your mistakes and what you've learned from them and how you've grown and developed as a writer. So until next time, keep writing, keep refining. For goodness sake, watch out for that info dump. That's probably the worst sin of all of the ones that we've covered today. And just keep practicing. Keep reading aloud. Keep reading what other writers write. Keep honing your craft. And remember that the rules apply, but sometimes they're there to be bent or broken, depending on what it is you're writing. So again, get in touch, Karen at mabelandstanleypublishing.com, if you've got any writing or publishing questions, or if you'd like to join our community, please do email me and inquire, and I'll be sure to get back to you. So thank you for listening. See you again next time, and let's get you on the right path.